It was in the early 20th century that a handful of doctors began performing crude sex reassignment surgeries, the most famous of which was on Danish painter Einar Wegener, who suffered through multiple surgeries in the 1930s in an attempt to become a woman and conceive a child. His story was retold in the 2015 film The Danish Girl, starring Eddie Redmayne. Wegener died as a result of his fifth surgery. In the 1940s, Dorothy Tipton lived as a male American jazz musician named Billy Tipton. Her own son did not know her secret until she died. In the 1950s, after his discharge from the Army, George Jorgensen underwent sex reassignment surgery and began calling himself Christine Jorgensen. A now classic headline declared, "Ex-GI becomes blonde bombshell." In 1965, psychologist John Money persuaded Johns Hopkins Hospital to begin performing sex reassignment surgeries. But after a 1979 study found that those who had had such surgeries were not more adjusted to society than their peers, the psychiatrist-in-chief at Hopkins Hospital, Dr. Paul McHugh, shut the program down. Head researcher John Meyer declared, "Surgery is not proper treatment for a psychiatric disorder. These patients have severe psychological problems that don't go away following surgery," a finding reinforced in a major 2011 study out of Sweden. According to Dr. McHugh, sex change is biologically impossible. Transgenderism is a mental disorder that merits treatment. People who undergo sex reassignment surgery do not change from men to women or vice versa. Rather, they become feminized men or masculinized women. Transgender feelings do not correspond with physical reality in a way similar to an anorexic who looks in the mirror and thinks that they are overweight. 70 to 80% of children who express transgender feelings will, over time, spontaneously lose those feelings. People who promote sexual reassignment surgery are collaborating with and promoting a mental disorder. Dr. McHugh also admonished those he called misguided doctors who administer puberty-delaying hormones to very young children, even though the drugs stunt the children's growth and risk causing sterility. Such actions, says McHugh, come close to child abuse.
Every so often, the DSM, you know what the DSM is, Diagnostic Statistical Manual, and this determines what is considered by the mental health profession as to what is pathological and not pathological. Every so often, they revise it. And every time they revise it, we psychologists, to renew our license, we have to sit there all day and listen to the revised version of it. But you get there, and the presenter says, this version is a better version than all the other previous DSMs because it's more scientific. We have scientific evidence. That's how he opens it, okay? We're sitting there for like 6 hours listening to all the diagnoses, and they flash us a picture of Chastity Bono smiling, and they said the original committee decided that transgenderism is a pathology. It's a distortion. But the committee got so many angry letters, so many angry protested letters, more than any other diagnosis, that the committee changed its mind and they normalized it. You could see it's not a scientific organization. Psychology, psychiatry is no longer a scientific organization. It's losing its credibility. So the DSMs are becoming opinion pieces.
This person had called and he had been visiting a therapist for just a year. Within 3 months of visiting the therapist, she had talked him into having his name changed legally. Within 8 months, he was receiving pressure from the therapist to have the sex reassignment surgery, or she was not going to see him any longer. What he also discovered during this visit is that she herself was a transgender person. So we have transgender therapists that are already going into the appointments with an agenda. And it is almost like, how fast can we get this person to take on this other identity, have their name changed, have sex reassignment surgery, and live in this identity?
I actually began to have all these thoughts about who am I? You know, am I really a girl? Am I a boy? During this time, I thought, well, this is something that must be so new to God, he didn't even understand it. With that, felt like I was on my own, that I needed to fix this myself. I was still going to church, and I met a girl one night. We began to date, and within 2 years, we got married?
When I was 16, I got a car, and I had met a girl. She became my girlfriend, and I would go out and pick her up, and we'd go out on dates, and I was totally lying to my parents where I was going. Eventually, that caught up with me because her parents started putting things together, and they didn't seem right. And she called my parents, and then my parents confronted me. That was when I told them I wanted to be a man, and my dad pretty much told me, we will not talk about this again. You are not going to do that. And I said to my mom, Mom, you know what? I really do want to be a boy. And my mom said, that's gross.
If you looked at one side of my life, it would look absolutely perfect. White picket fence, 2 cars in the garage, everything's good. I'm making good money. The kids are healthy. Everything's good. I didn't drink around the house. I wasn't a slosh drunk at home. I did all that stuff when I was away, and I'd get that relief out of the way and then come home and be a different person. So I had this total 2 worlds that I lived in, actually 3 when you think about it, because I had the family life, I had the purple dress life, and then I had a great career that I was developing and becoming very successful at.
Even though the girl knew about me, she still viewed me as her boyfriend. So we kind of went off and on there for a little while. And then when I became 19, I got out of the house. I started doing my research to find out who would help me. I went to a doctor, and he's like, yeah, I can start you on hormones. So I moved out of the house, and I began the hormones, and I thought I was free. I was like, yeah, I'm finally here. I have arrived. I am free. This is my life.
I went to this club. I was about 17 years old. I was talking to people, and they told me about the show, and they said that every person that's in this show is a man. And I was intrigued by that. I wanted to see that. And there was this transgender woman on stage with the body of a woman. And she had this red dress on with all these rhinestones and sparkles, and she was poured basically into the dress. And I was confused because someone told me that everyone that's going to perform here is a man. But clearly my eyes was telling me that that was a woman, and I could not believe what I saw. And then right there at that moment, I knew that's what I was.
After I graduated from high school, I moved out here to Los Angeles to go to art school and was taken to my first gay bar when I was 16 years old. You know, they liked me. I was young. I was easily taken advantage of. Drugs, alcohol came into the picture. I was drunk every night. I dropped out of school and basically, ended up homeless.
The thing about males that attracted me is because I always felt like the other, and I thought that then if you're the other, then you should actually be attracted to men, and thinking in my mind that one day I will be this, and then I could get not only the protection, but the completeness of what a man does for a woman.
I went directly to the dressing room to see this lady up close and in person and ask her, was she a lady? At that time I asked her that question. She had her head down and they were putting the wig on. She had no clothes on. She threw her head up and she looked at me and she opened her legs and she said, this is all woman. Male genitalia was there. I backed up and I ran out of the dressing room. I was shaking. I couldn't believe that this was true. And I knew that it was possible.
I used to go to these X-rated bookstores all the time, and I saw this one magazine, and it kind of caught my eye, and it said Transformation, So I grabbed the magazine, and I'm tired of all the other stuff, girl on girl, guy on girl, guys, bisexual, all this different stuff. I needed something, new to fuel the fire. So I saw this magazine, Transformation, and so I picked it up, and I'm looking at it, and it's like a she-male, It's like the top half, they have the boobs and the penis on the bottom, and and I thought, oh, this is cool, this is different, and so I grabbed it, paid for it, took it home, got excited with it, and took care of myself, and then I couldn't stop, you see. Then it had to be movies and videos and everything with the she-male stuff because it was exciting, And I saw this ad in one of in the magazine, and it said Transformation. You come down and get a makeover, $75, Glamour Boutique. here in Vegas. And so I called them up. I said, I need an appointment to get a makeover. And said, yeah, come on down, such and such time and everything. And I went. They made me look good. They called me Joey, like Joey Heatherton. And I mean, I was gorgeous, you know, all the makeup, the wig, the clothes. I was like, I'm sold.
I'm walking down the streets of Kingston, Georgia, trying to get enough courage, enough strength to just end it right there and then. And then I met a guy there in the homeless shelter who was a cross-dresser. And eventually we got to know each other pretty well. We got an apartment together. And the whole time while I'm homeless, I'm screaming at God saying, why are you letting this happen to me? Why me? What did I do wrong to you?
I'm watching this television thing, and when it went off, just like that, a voice said to me, you were supposed to have been born a boy. I didn't know gay people, didn't want to be a gay person, but when I realized I was born in the wrong body, and that's why I didn't really like boys, that's why I was the tomboy, I was my father's little Ed, it resonated.
She said, we have these get-togethers ever so often, you know, where we go out. It's called Girls' Night Out, where a bunch of girls, you know, guys get dressed up like girls and they go out on the town, mainly to gay bars. There's a couple of them getting the operation and transitioning, and within about a year, I was like sold, you know. I couldn't stop. I said, I want to get it too.
By the time I was 39 years old and I started hearing about transgenders, I would have been struggling for about 36 years from the time my grandmother first cross-dressed me. That's a long time to keep a secret, to struggle, and to try to deal with it on your own without any psychiatric or psychological help. So I went to a specialist, the #1 guy in the world because I had the money to do it, and it was a guy who wrote the original international Harry Benjamin Standards of Care. He was the guy, he was the guru, knew how to diagnose the disorder, he knew what appropriate treatments to take, and he knew who should be doing the surgery if there was to be surgery and the hormone therapy. He knew it. He was the guy. So I went into him and sat with him. In 45 minutes, he looked at me and he says, you've got gender dysphoria. And what you need to do is undergo gender reassignment surgery, take hormones, and just completely change and become a female. And I was kind of dumbfounded.
The fact is that the research that's being done, the research that's being conducted on transgender people, both in terms of the surgery itself and the long-term effects, it's usually being done by people who have a political interest in this, okay? Just like in the issue of homosexuality. Most of the people that control the funding for the research are pro-gay. The American Psychological Association took the position of normalizing homosexuality, and any publication that is put out by the APA or any journal that is influenced by the APA is going to be pro-gay research. It's going to justify its position. So most people are having to read the distortions that are being put out by these political activist organizations that pose as objective scientists.
I went to a club that same night, and I actually went into my closet to find what could I put on to make myself look masculine. I remember finding a hat and maybe a shirt that I unbuttoned down to my chest a little bit. I mean, I tried to butch myself up and look more like a man. And when I walked in that bar, it was like my first step in that bar was if I had been going in that bar forever. I walked in like I owned the place. No one in that bar would have ever known that I was totally straight, perhaps. I mean, I wasn't gay or transgender, but it was like my new identity. So I walked into that bar, and for 18 years, from the time I walked in there, I transitioned my life to being a male.
One thing led to another, and I got the name change, and then I had to go and talk to a psychotherapist and get 2 letters, one from the psychotherapist, which had like $450, and then another one was $250 from a psychiatrist. And then I went to Scottsdale with these letters and talked to the surgeon. He says, "Oh yeah, you're good to go." You know, this was in August, and I wanted to get the surgery as soon as I could, but I figured, well, I'm not going to get it for a while. And he said, well, I can do the surgery in November, and it was only 3 months away. And I was like, okay, I had the money, everything was lined up, bing, bang, boom. And here I go, I woke up from the operation, and here I got these big boobs and the vagina and the whole thing, tubes hanging out here and there, and it's like, wow, what have I done?
Absolutely, there's no evidence for brain difference. This is a lie that is being promoted by an incredible industry that's making a lot of money on these poor people, okay? Oh, your brain is different. Where in the brain, you show me, where in the brain is this boy believing he's a girl?
The second week I went back and I told him about my childhood. I gave him some of the information about what had happened in my childhood more in depth, about the abuse by the uncle, and he says, oh, and by the way, he says, I have your letter of approval here. You can take to the doctor and have your surgery, 2 sessions. And I said, well, that seems a bit quick to make that kind of assessment. So while he was prepared for me, he said, no, you're a candidate, perfect candidate for this. I've been doing this for years. I know what I'm talking about. And I said, okay, that's fine. Keep the letter. Let me think on it. And I waited 2 years. And during that 2 years, the pressure cooker, maybe from hearing it, maybe from grandma, maybe from the radio playing in my head, maybe from the sexual abuse, I can't begin to tell you what it all was, but there was a big mix master going on with thrown in with a little alcohol that by the time I was 42 years old, I had sat down with my wife and said, here's what's been happening. We need to divorce and I need to change genders.
I had met some transsexual friends. I actually thought they were women at first, but I was told they were really men. And I don't know why, I just took a liking to them, started hanging around them. I was 18 years old. They hung out in a nightclub that I would frequent. I actually became best friends with one of them. Talked to me about hormones and stuff like that, because I said, I would dress up like a woman and go out for Halloween just to have fun. Well, I found myself liking it and wanting to be like them.
I remember going to the bar when I was 15 years old, and I remember watching these drag queens perform. And I remember thinking to myself, they are being celebrated. They are being loved and liked. And so I remember thinking to myself, one day I'm gonna be accepted. I'm gonna be loved for being a female impersonator. And so I remember pursuing it when I was 17 years old. And by the time I was 18, I began competing in professional pageantry. And by the age of 19, I was competing at the Miss Gay Texas pageant. And I remember thinking to myself, wow, I have invested so much time and energy, and I'm actually amounting to something.
I was in a pattern of confession, remorse, doing little things like trying on some pantyhose and stuff like that. When I got back into church, I started writing Christian songs, started singing them in church, and this young lady took a liking to me. I asked her to marry me, and we got married. I did not tell her, my new wife, about the cross-dressing. I told her about the alcohol. I told her about, the troubled childhood, but I didn't tell her about that.
At 15, I thought I came to my mom and told her that I was gay. But then probably by 20, I knew there was something more, that I wanted to be a woman. Probably about at the age of 24, 25, I was introduced to a gay bar. And it was on Halloween of all days, and I won Best Drag. And I met a transgendered woman, and we became best friends, so I started getting to the shows. And then I met my partner at a drag show, and we were together for nearly 17 years. So through that time, I started all my hormonal therapy, counseling, and about 8 years ago, I had my papers signed to have my sex change. but instead we decided to put a down payment on a house. So I just put that on a back burner.
It wasn't long after we were married that I actually started cross-dressing in front of my wife. Matter of fact, I had her buying my clothes, my makeup, those things. She was just trying to understand it, okay? Then there came a place where we can't do this anymore. So I went to that same pastor I lived with for a while. And we tried to pray it through. And we had several prayer sessions, but it wasn't affecting me. So then he decided to send me to a psychologist. So he actually made the appointment for me. I went and saw the psychologist. We had our first session. And he said, I want to talk to you again. So I went into the second session. And he says, well, what you have is gender identity disorder. And then he wanted to know how I wanted to treat it, which confused me. Because always before you go into a doctor, they find out what's wrong with you and they say, this is the course of treatment to get over this. He didn't do that. As a matter of fact, he said, what we need to do is start bringing your wife into these sessions so that we can counsel towards divorce. And then what we're going to do is I've got another doctor we'll send you to, and we'll start you on hormone therapy and all these things. We'll have our sessions and work through this. You'll start dressing in female attire all the time. And in 12 or 18 months, we'll get you some letters for sexual reassignment surgery, because then you can be the woman you already are.
I eventually met the host of the show. She saw me and she thought that I was the cutest little boy, and she said, well, let me dress you up in drag and see what happens. So she dressed me up, and the transformation was unbelievable. It was unbelievable to me, and it was unbelievable to her, and it was almost as if I was taken over. There was some sort of entity in me. I was someone else when I dressed up, and I got the opportunity to perform for the very, very first time. And when I hit that stage, I had a mask on. I was a different person, and I was embodying that transgender woman that I saw that first time.
I went ahead and had the gender reassignment surgery. I had a career still in the automobile industry, and I had the surgery, and I was promptly terminated from the corporation. They cleaned my desk out, handed it to me, and said goodbye.
So I took the hormones. Of course, right away, I started filling out muscularly. I started getting acne and started to grow a beard. And then I continued to work out on top of that. So I got pretty buffed and then taking the hormones. And then I was taking an extra little bit more to make sure that I could keep up this physique when I worked out. Because my goal was not to ever be known as a woman. My goal was to only be known as a man. And I couldn't figure out, because I had met some other transsexual people, and they were all about being known. And I'm like, no, I don't want to sit around in a group and talk about being a transgender person. I just want to go and live a normal life. This life as a man, normally. That was my whole goal. And so in continuing to work out, I realized later that that was my form of protection. The harder I worked out, the less weak I felt.
I got into high school and I decided, okay, now the challenge is on. I'm not gonna have the operation, so I really am gonna have to try a little harder to conform and not be such an androgynous tomboy. Fortunately, I have an older sister, so I could take notes from her. And I decided maybe I should grow my hair out a little bit and try on some of my sister's clothes. Nothing too lacy or pink or anything like that, but something that could pass as a girl and I could still feel comfortable in. And then I decided maybe I should try dating boys, because perhaps there's something in me that never got awakened, and I just don't knock it till you try it kind of thing. So I asked a boy out my junior year to a turnabout dance and borrowed one of my sister's dresses. So I have this picture of me standing very awkwardly in this dress that wasn't even mine, and nothing really happened that night as far as sparks flying or any attraction with this guy. In fact, the more I tried to date boys and even experiment sexually with them, I discovered it didn't awaken anything in me. all it did was make me more intensely jealous. I wanted to be the boy. I wanted to be the man with the woman, not the woman with the man. And even when I was dressed in those dresses, deep down, I literally felt like a man dressed in drag. I just knew this wasn't my authentic self.
When I was 12 years old, I began to investigate sexuality, and I would dig into pornography, and so I saw myself as just falling in love with these women. And so I thought, well, no, I'm really a male. I really identify more with this male. I think that's a way of me being able to repair myself and to find out what true love is. And I thought that was true love. And I was trying to piece this broken girl.
All science aside, the media continues to line its pockets by printing stories of celebrities who have declared themselves to be transgendered, including Chastity Bono, who now calls herself Chaz. Female model Tracy Beatty, who gained celebrity by giving birth to a child while calling herself Thomas. Olympic athlete Bruce Jenner, who now calls himself Caitlyn. Army soldier Bradley Manning, who now calls himself Chelsea. Even the Boy Scouts have yielded to media pressure and begun accepting girls into its ranks who claim to be boys.